Hi everyone. So for anyone who's interested in gardening, food gardening and in particular permaculture, I want to show you around our place. I'll start with an overview and then I'll do some sections on each sort of aspect of gardening and permaculture. So we bought this property about 18 years ago, just before we had kids, and it belonged to some people who went into a retirement home. So it had the typical garden from way back, I guess. It had oleanders, daisies, lots of agapanthus, and a lot of just really hardy stuff that wasn't very useful or beautiful or food producing. So the first thing we did was just spend time looking at it, and this is one of the first things that permaculturalists will tell you to do. Just take time to get to know your site, look at all the microclimates, where the sun hits, where it doesn't, if you get frost, that sort of thing. I didn't really know that then, but because we had little kids, we started having babies, that sort of forced me to do that exact thing, because I'd stand on the front steps with a baby in my arms and just watch everything. So that was actually a really good process. It was at that time that I also discovered permaculture, and I started reading books and just getting my head around a lot of the different ideas there were about gardening. So the beginning couple of years, we basically ignored the garden and just didn't water it, just saw what lived, saw what died, and saw what happened. Then after that time, we started to plan things. One of the first things we did was plant what is now our orchard. The slope that it was on was, I mean, this is Hurstbridge. We don't really have soil, we just have shale. So I knew that it was going to be a matter of building up soil, and we did that. We dug big holes and filled them with compost and horse poo and stuff like that, watered it, let them sit, and we planted our trees. I'll talk more about the orchard in a minute, but that was the first step. And the second step was there were two driveways coming down into the house, and we just didn't want all our front yard to be taken up in driveways. So we reclaimed one of them and just turned it back into garden beds. I'll show you that soon too. Over the years, I mean, we've been growing pretty much since then. It did take, I'd say, a good 5 years for us to really build up the soil enough that things started to boom. In the meantime, of course, we were still growing things, but it just, without soil, you're limited. So we really had to build up the soil health, all the microorganisms and worms, and not just for the soil, but for the moisture retaining qualities of the soil. It's pretty dry in Australia in general, and it can be pretty dry here too. So all of those things just took time. So I'll go up to the top of the driveway and we'll start showing you around. So this is what I call our reclaimed driveway, and the reason for that is you can see where the gate is at the top of the, well, original driveway, but this part that the camera is focused right at used to be a second driveway. I'll just go around so you can see a little bit better. That was, you can see the neighbour's fence on the left. This was just another driveway, and we've built it up over time. But having said that, we've also used, it's hard to see with all the greenery, but this is all bathtubs. The reason for that is that the driveway was compacted gravel, really compacted gravel, because this house is from the 70s and it had been a driveway that whole time, I think. So we, for that reason, and also because of the gum trees that surround our property, we put pretty much everything into raised beds. When we started, sort of 18, 16 years ago, we did try raised beds that didn't, they were raised but they were still open to the ground, and we found we just couldn't keep them moist enough. The gum trees, I think, steal everything, and that's when we started moving to above ground beds. So there's a couple that are wicking style, but most of them are just literally bathtubs with the plug hole left open and filled with soil and compost. And we just replenish them a bit every year and go from there. You'll see I've got a lot of other tubs as well. Tubs of every size. I've got a lot of them second hand. I've told you about, well, if you haven't heard me talking about free goods, they're free goods Facebook pages. People just give stuff away, and we also go to our local tip shop where we get a lot of large containers that can be cut in two and are very useful. So the other interesting thing about this reclaimed driveway area is you can see the neighbours have got this big hedge at the side. Now, looking straight ahead is north, so that's west, and that's giving us shade. Originally I was worried that we'd lose too much sun, but it's turned out that I think it's actually helped this area because it doesn't get that blinding westerly sun anymore. So this bit just thrives. In winter, I must say, it's a little bit harder, and I've had to figure out what sort of things will grow here in winter with not much sun at all. But in general, it's been just a work in progress getting used to it. So I'll try and explain what we've got here. This is some chicory, walking onions. They're the type that just keep self-sowing. A whole lot of coriander going to seed. This is all raspberries. They'll swamp us with raspberries soon. This tree here that's in a pot, that's just an old barrel that we've cut in half and used both halves as a pot. That's elderberry. So you can see the flowers on there already. Next to it is a cherry. There's that one. And I've got that in a pot, but it's open to the ground. So it's still hopefully got room to let its roots grow down further. That's, of course, rhubarb, looking extremely vigorous. I've got a couple of composts in here, compost bins, but I'm going to talk about compost later. These are, well, they're potatoes. This is red currants. That one's just going crazy. What else can I show you? That's an apple. This is just, I love flowers and I love granny's bonnets, so the garden is a mix of indigenous flowers and edible plants. It's a red rhubarb, and this is an avocado. It's looking not particularly healthy, but look, there's all the leaves coming back. They're very sensitive to frost when they're just getting established. And I do, oh, that thing's fallen over. That's my frost protection. So that usually sits up around here when it's frosty to shade the avocado. And you can see it's been purposely planted under this bottle brush to give it shelter from frost as well. So what I've been taught is that as soon as it gets to 1.5 meters, that's above the frost line. So then we'll be able to stop sheltering it. But until that, I just have to be really careful. And next year, try and not let it get burnt off at the top. So this is what happens when it gets frosted. Hasn't killed the plant, but it's just, slowed it down a bit. Oh, there's another apple, another citrus. And yeah, that's our front fence and looking up to the road. So first to look at the orchard. This is the view of our house looking down from the driveway. On the left here is the orchard. Now I say orchard, it's pretty small by orchard standards. But we do have, trying to think how many fruit trees we have in there. It's quite a lot. I took the Jackie French approach. So Jackie French always says, just plant things really close together. That fruit trees can be planted like, a couple of meters apart from each other. And so I took that literally, and that's what I've done. And it seems to have worked really well. I mean, you probably don't get the yields because of cross shading of things, but I find that it gives really good protection and just, I don't know, it's easy to maintain, and plus I guess I get more into a small space. So I'll go a bit closer to the orchard. We've got fig and a whole lot of artichokes, globe artichokes, and there's a couple of olives behind those big grassy things, hard to see, but they're coming along. We've got plums, nectarines, pear, beautiful pear tree, gives us lots of fruit, pomegranate, cherries. And then there's quite a bit of understory as well. You'll see there are those black pipes going over. That's what we use for netting in summer. We do find that if we don't put netting up, we lose pretty much all of the fruit. So these days we have a big piece of net that we put over there. As you can see, it's not professionally done. Nothing in this garden is professional. It's all sort of what we've rigged together. But, and it's probably a bit hard to even see all the trees there, to be honest. But you can see, I've tried to make it into a bit of a food forest. So underneath we've got lots of flowering plants to try and bring bees in. Borage just self-seeds all over the place. That's the one with the purple flowers. The red flowers is a salvia. And you can see there's calendula back there with the orange flowers. These at the front, that's the pink is granny's bonnets that I love. Oh, there's a couple of dwarf trees at the front. This one in a pot here is, hang on, I'm trying to get back so you can see the pot. It's the one right in front of me. That's a strawberry guava, and I love the taste of those. This is fairly new addition, but it's our outdoor bath. So you can either light a fire under it, or I've got a fitting that goes on an inside tap, and you can fill it up with hot water just like a bath, but it's outside. We've got a lot of things in pots, so that poor branch has fallen off, but you can see the citrus are really in bloom. Yeah, look, that's pretty much the orchard. As I said, that was the first thing we planted. We dug really big, deep holes, which was extremely hard work because it's so rocky here. Filled them up with heaps and heaps of compost and horse poo and planted the trees. But it did take a good 5 years, I reckon, for the trees to actually start growing. And since then, they've been just getting better and better and producing really well. I cut them the height they are just so I can reach the fruit. But I don't know if you can see, but there is quite a bit of fruit on the way. That's all the nectarines. This section of the garden in front of me, that's what I would call our zone 1. Well, most of the front garden is really, but in permaculture, that's the area that you're going to be walking past all the time, noticing all the time, and that's where you put all your herbs, things like that you want to just pop out the front door and grab easily. So most of our veggies are in there. I'll take you on a bit of a walk. Now, with all these above ground beds, one of the things I learned about or read a lot about over the years has been rotation planting, crop rotation. But I think that the thing I love about permaculture is that you work with what you've got, and that includes yourself. So I learned fairly quickly that crop rotation wasn't going to work for me. I'm a very haphazard gardener, and I tend to just plant everything all mixed up with everything else. So the only way crop rotation is going to work is, say, if I put only tomatoes in that bed, and then next season I plant something that isn't in that family. But I might have one tomato and one cabbage and one lettuce and all that. So I'm not a scientific gardener, so it's quite possible that I'm limiting the yield by doing that, but it's just how I do it. So I'm happy with that. Plus I do think it does an amazing job of confusing pests, because we never really get issues with pests here, and I think it's because there's just so many things mixed up that they don't know where to head. Like, you know, cabbage moths. Well, there is that one there, but all the other cabbages are everywhere else. So these are all above ground beds. I think there is a wicking bed or two. Yep, there you go. So there's the water inlet for the wicking bed. Having said that, I just water them from the top anyway. So I find that I guess the main thing about wicking beds is the ability to leave them and not have to water them for quite a long time. My focus on water is creating soil and conditions that just keep the water in. So you'll see, for example, really thick level of pea straw or whatever straw I've got. And the other thing is that in every bed I mix probably a quarter of it is coconut coir. So I'll show you that later. If you don't know what coconut coir is, it's just a fibre that absorbs water, and it absorbs a lot of water. So my theory is I water, any excess gets absorbed into the coconut coir and then pulled out by the plants if and when they need it. Okay, so you can see we're in between seasons here. We're at the end of winter and I've put in some new summer things. This is a good example of me. I actually don't know what that is. It's going to be either a zucchini or a cucumber. I'm guessing it's a zucchini because I haven't put it near a trellis. But as I said, haphazard gardener, I just put things in and see what happens. These are a whole lot of potatoes that are looking beautiful. I always plant them in pots because the times that I've planted them in garden beds, I just can't get rid of them for years. Like you're just pulling out potatoes forever. There's a nice head of broccoli. And this is the walking onion I talked about. So see how it creates this little sort of new plant at the top. And as it dies off, that just simply falls over like that and establishes itself, and you've got a second plant. So they just, once you've got them, you'll never not have them. Let's look around this side of the middle section. I'm loving all these peas. Don't know if you can see all the purple peas there. It's the first time I've grown the purple potted peas, and took us a little while to figure out how to use them. We were thinking they'd be like sugar snaps or something that you can just eat when they're young, but we discovered you have to let them go till the peas have become big inside them, and they're not that sweet. They're we use them in stews and everything, but they're not so much the kind of ones that you just devour straight off the plant. So that's evening primrose. Been there for a while. It just keeps sort of coming back. More summer crops. These are all the peas that have just, going beautifully. More purple peas. Purple peas. And broad beans. We grow broad beans every winter and we love them. The kids aren't so hot on them, but Sean and I love them. This is what a broad bean looks like. So you just open it up. We never do the double shelling, we just shell them once. There's another kind of pea there, that one. So we've got a mixture of all kinds of peas. Some of them are really sweet, some of them are that you eat the peas themselves, some you eat the pods. And look, it's a little hard to show you around here because it's like a jungle. But more peas, more broad beans, more, looks like lettuce self-seeding, coriander, parsley, a tomato that's just starting off. We get things self-seeding all over the place. So again, all this parsley and lettuce is self-seeded, the silver beet, but I leave it because it's great to have. And the last bed. See, we've got a bit of, I was going to say aphids, but something else on that kale. So what I find with things that we do get issues with, say if we get a brassica that gets aphids, if I just leave it, it will be inundated with aphids, but somehow they then leave all the other brassicas alone. So I've gotten the habit of leaving them, not pulling them out, because I don't want to disturb them, so they go off and find another home. I call it my sacrificial brassica. And again, this is the fat one. That's a thin one off the same plant, so I guess it's going to end up the same, but they're just so sweet. You can chomp into them like that. One of the ideas in permaculture is about using all of the spaces, going right to the edges and using the spaces that are in between every other space. So early on, I decided this path that's on the west face, it does have quite a lot of shelter from gums, but I just thought that's too good an opportunity to miss. So that became our berry path. It's going down a hill, but you can see there's a lot of raspberries at the top, and then going down to thornless blackberries, some loganberries, a bit of a mix. And they're all in, like I said, everything's in tubs. So these are all in a mixture of old laundry troughs, and that one's just one of those black plastic bins. As you can see, they look really healthy. The challenge with the berries is they look really healthy now, but once it gets to summer, they do get a bit blasted by sun. So I've really got to be careful to keep moisture up to them. Compost. So we have a lot of different ways of dealing with compost at our place. Compost, not compost, kitchen scraps, garden waste, anything organic. You can see for sure that I haven't prettied up the compost for you. It's a 2-bay system, and of course ideally you would have 1 bay that you're adding things to. Well, actually we really should have a 3-bay system. Then we would be adding stuff to one, the other one would be being turned over between the 2 remaining bays until it turns into compost. Usually what our aim was to fill up 1 bay and then leave it to compost while we start filling up the other one, and by the time the other one's full, the first one's ready. It doesn't seem to work like that for us though. I keep saying we're a bit chaotic, and that's how we are. So what I tend to do is I try and put things into 1 bay, but in the meantime, you see I've got a shovel there, I just shovel out compost from the bottom. So it works for me. I've also mentioned before that we chuck anything into the compost that was once living. That includes, you can see I've got woolen curtains there, and an old feather doona, cardboard boxes, there's shirts and denim jeans and all sorts of stuff there. This is also where we put all of our garden scraps, except for really weedy things. So if I was going to prune this bush, it would all go in there. So this is a long-term prospect. I don't expect anything quick to happen here. It just sits there and gets eaten by worms, and eventually we dig it out the bottom and put it on the garden. But there's a bunch of other ways we compost, so I'll show you them as well. So this is the second way we compost. This is for household organic waste, and I should say that doesn't just mean food scraps. It means food scraps, which is things minus the stuff we've given to the chooks, but it also means tissues, bits and pieces of paper or kitchen towel that we've used to wipe the oil off a pan, or we use bamboo and cotton buds, so we chuck them in here too. Anything pretty much that was once living. Big bits I put back in that compost bay that I said, like if I had an old straw hat, that would go in the compost bay. This is for smaller bits, plus all the kitchen scraps that we haven't given to the chooks. And this one is actually, it's sort of at its resting point, and I've put a whole lot of mushroom compost in the top. So I get that from a local organic mushroom grower just by the bed, and chuck that in as a nice filler. The worms love it. I don't know if you can see, but there's quite a lot of worms around, and this will just sit until we have a look and decide that it's ready. So we've got a couple of bins like that, and we're always using them. They're a constant work in progress. If anything, we'd probably like to have a third one. More compost. So this one's a little bit different than the black bins. It's called a green cone, and I wanted to try it out. I'd heard a bit about it. The way it works is that you dig a hole into the ground for an underneath section. It's a bit hard to see here, but it's like a laundry basket at the bottom. So the idea is that apart from those little holes that are dug into the ground, nothing can get in there, so no rats or mice. And the other thing about it is that there, underneath this green part, there's a gap and then an inner black cone. So the idea is that this always has to be put somewhere in the sun, and the sun hits the sun cone, the green cone, heats it up, and the hot air swirls around the walls, which heats up your compost and helps it decompose. This one's also at a final stage, so I added some mushroom compost to that as well, and that was actually right up to the lid before, and it's already sinking down. So that you'll find that happens. You just leave it for a while and that will probably sink down another foot, and then I can keep putting stuff in it. And this is the final compost system that I wanted to show you. So I've said before, kitchen scraps and small organic things we put into our black bins and the green cone. Then kitchen scraps that the chooks can eat go there. Anything that's big or branches of things that we've pruned goes in the bays. But the one thing that's left over is weedy things. So I'm talking about blackberries that are coming up where you don't want them, or clover, oxalis, onion weed, that sort of thing. Things that, or even bad grasses, cooch and things like that are difficult to get rid of. If I'm ever digging up something like that or weeding it out of the garden, I don't want it in the compost because I don't want to spread it. Instead, I make weed tea. So this happens a couple of times a year when I do my major weeding, and basically it just means that I pour buckets of weeds into these bins. I've got, I think, 4 or 5 scattered around the yard. I pour them in there, I fill them, cover it with water. I don't know if you can see that, but it just rots everything, kills the weeds. Goodness, you can see it's a pretty living environment down there, and I can also tell you it's very smelly. But this gets rid of the weeds after about 3 months. It's rotted down enough that is safe to put back into the garden or on the compost, and it won't spread the weeds. And I think that's a really clever way of getting rid of stuff that you don't want to spread and making it a nutrient instead. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of water in that bucket. Usually I get a pitchfork and just get all the solid materials out. Usually I'll just put them in a compost, and they help the composting process because there are so many, microorganisms growing in there. And then I bucket out the rest of the liquid. Technically you're meant to water it down, a bit like wormweed, but me being me, I just chuck it around the garden. With a bucket, I just walk everywhere and chuck it everywhere, and then I give the garden a really good water, and I figure that sort of dilutes it a bit. But so those are all our composting methods. Not sure if you can see what you're looking at there, but water, to me, water is really important in every garden. It's great for bees, insects, birds, skinks, any kind of little critter that's trying to make a life. And the more biodiversity your garden has, the healthier it is, in my opinion. So I'll show you the different water we have in our garden. This one is an old frog pond. I think that's what you call them. A friend had it just to give away and we claimed it. As you can see, you probably can't really see the water in there, but there is water in there, as well as a lot of water plants, and we always have frogs and tatties there every year. I put things like broken ceramic pots around the edges and wood, just as extra habitat. I guess they can live under the little edge of the pond as well, but the idea is that skinks and lizards and all sorts of insects can come here and drink whenever they need to. This is another water bath we have, made from a bath that I've just put a plastic plug in and siliconed it closed. And again, it's always got stuff living in it. It's absolutely beautiful clean water in there. We never get mozzies. I think it must be because of tadpoles. There are also little water snails and things there. Some of the water plants we have, this is Lebanese cress from what I know, watercress. That's really good on sandwiches. This is a zolla, and you can see it gets thicker the further up you go, but that is part of the reason for that is it's right next to the chook shed, and chooks love a zolla. It's also really good for composts. It grows like crazy, and you can scoop out whole handfuls of it, come back in a couple of days and it will have replenished itself. This is another little water bath, and this shows duck potatoes that are starting to grow. I'll just try and show you so that's a duck potato, that little thing there. And they'll grow and multiply, and once the leaves die down a bit and the potatoes are really big, you can cook them, use them, you can bake them or stir fry them. Just another edible plant. Where else have we got water? We have little bird baths everywhere around the garden. That one's getting hidden by all the flowers, but yeah, just multiple places. Everywhere we can fit them, we put a little bath. So, more composting, but this time chickens. So, because we grow a lot of food and we always cook at home, we use heaps of veggies and we create a lot of food waste, or food kitchen scraps in the kitchen. So anything that the chooks can eat, we give them. And we also, every time I'm pruning, weeding in the garden, anything that's not either weedy or too big will go in the chook shed, and they'll eat it, scratch it around and process it. So that's for small, like veggie prunings. If I'm pulling up something at the end of the season, that'll all go in there. Even if it's a whole broccoli plant, it'll just go in there, roots and all. Anything that's too big will go in the compost bays. And just for fun, I'll explain this chook shed. So we've had chooks for 15 years, and honestly, we have always looked after them well, but they kept getting eaten by foxes. So occasionally it would be because we'd let them out at night by mistake. But it got to a point where the foxes were coming by in the day when we'd let them out of their pen, and the foxes were just nabbing them in the middle of the day. And at that point we were just like, oh, this is ridiculous. It's not fair on the chooks, it's not fair on us, it's just not a good situation. So we decided to build them a completely fox-proof chook shed. So this chook shed is made with, it's got thick wire on all sides of it, including the floor. We dug down into the ground about 1/2 foot deep and laid the same thickness wire all across the ground. But I'll show you a close up in a moment of where a fox still got in. So I was talking about the fox. I put my hand there so you can see how it compares in size. But this wire was just bent a little bit to the sides, and we thought, oh, that's pretty safe. No fox is going to get in there. But one did, and it killed all of the chickens. There were 4 chickens in here. Couldn't get them out through that hole because they were too big. So it must have been a small fox. So we just had chickens with no heads left in here, and there were feathers around that hole. So we knew what had happened. And this is the fancy artwork that Sean did, my partner, to close up that hole. So no more foxy loxy. But we learned our lesson with that they really can get in to the smallest places. Mushrooms. Mushrooms is something I've been getting into lately, and in a few different ways. So first of all, I should introduce you to Shawnee Scarecrow. That's him right there. But these are some mushroom beds that I made. I bought some mushroom spawn, grain spawn, from a supplier, Aussie Mushroom Supplies I think it was, and it gives instructions of how to layer sawdust straw, wood chips. You do a layer, and then you put the grain spawn in and layer it in the other way. and then just keep watering it, and then after a while, hopefully, that should start popping up mushrooms. I've got King Stropharia mushrooms and king oyster mushrooms. There's another weed tea bin, and of course the chook palace. The way I got into mushrooms in the first place was that I heard about a local organic mushroom grower so the thing with organic mushrooms, commercial growers, is as soon as they start getting fungus gnats, they're little tiny sort of fruit fly things, or any kind of mould, they have to basically retire the beds. A conventional grower would spray them to kill those things and keep producing mushrooms. The thing about the organic growers, though, is because they can't spray them, they have to retire the beds before they're actually stopped producing mushrooms. So our local grower is kind enough to sell us on those beds at a very low rate, and you can either use them as mushroom compost, which is what I've done in those compost bins up there that I've shown you, or you can keep watering them and they'll keep growing. Now, it took me maybe four attempts before I figured out a good way to actually keep them moist and grow more mushrooms. But we've had amazing success with them and grown heaps of mushrooms, and I just love growing mushrooms. So this is the way we ended up being able to do it, this contraption that Shawnee created. It's, again, all reused materials, but I'll open it up to show you how. The blanket is what keeps it moist. All right. So when we get these beds, we slide them at the bottom, the middle, and put them in the top. And so we can grow 6 beds of mushrooms at the same time if we want to. This, however, is something different. I also tried making these beds with the grain spawn that I got. And as you can see, very exciting, they're starting to produce. So this was the method where you pasteurize the straw, mix in the grain spawn, and then pack it really tightly you can pack it into a tub like this. You can drill holes in a container and pack the straw into there, or you can use these, they're called mushroom, what are they called? Mushroom straw logs or something. So you basically pack them full of the pasteurized straw with the grain spawn, and they will then start growing from out of the little holes. So I'm really excited at what's happening there. But there's yet one more kind of mushrooms that I want to show you. So this is around on the south side of our house where it's quite shady. They get a little bit of sunlight, not much. So this is called inoculating logs with mushroom spawn. What you need is some sort of hardwood. Any hardwood will do. Probably best not the hardest of hardwoods because it's just so hard to drill into. And it also importantly needs to be cut no longer than 5 weeks ago because it has to be fresh. The reason for that is that the mushrooms need all that cellulose and living sort of tissue from the tree to feed off. And the process that you do it is that I'm trying to find here. So you see how I don't know if you can see it, it's here. Sean has drilled holes in there, and you buy dowling that is inoculated with mushrooms. You hammer a piece of dowling in and cover it over with beeswax. And you do that every 10 centimetres or so. So you can see there around, there's another, and there must be one up there, yep, and another one. So that goes right around each log, 10 centimetres up and down. You stand them in a bucket of water because you don't want them to dry out. And this is a very long-term mushroom plan. So this one can take a year to a year and a half to even start producing mushrooms. But the beauty of this method is that once they start, they can go then for 5 or 10 years. So I'm thinking these smaller logs might go, if we're lucky, they'll go for 5 years. The much bigger logs might go even longer. And they just keep producing. Mushrooms feed off cellulose. So as they eat the wood, that's their food, and they keep producing. So I'll have to keep you posted what happens with that. They've been there about maybe 2 months. So we're a long way off mushrooms yet. but it's really exciting. Other living spaces. So part of permaculture is, it's not all about gardens. That's a common misperception about it, but it's about the entire way you live in the community, in your house, in your block. And that includes looking at what spaces could be used or put to good purpose. One of the things we've been loving, we've been in Melbourne in lockdown for going on 200 days. Bit crazy. So the whole family's been stuck together. And this fire pit has been amazing because we can't go out on the weekends or any time. So just having fires and sitting around, drinking a homemade beer or wine, chatting to the kids, it's been absolutely amazing. So if you can set up a fire area, brilliant. Of course, the bathtub is another beautiful thing to do, and it's right near the house. So technically you could have a fire going and people sitting around here and people lying in the bath with their bathers on, of course. And then down here, got the chooks also near the house. But this is the pathway to our undercover porch area. So this is a way, we've got a fairly small house and we have a lot of people over and the kids do too. So this was a way we had of extending the space a little bit. Around this path there are, as you can see, just mountains of flowers. There's a couple of veggie gardens there with more peas, ornamental grape. This is where I put a lot of the flowers just because they're so pretty. And you may have noticed a lot of strawberries too. So the idea is that these are mountain strawberries, alpine strawberries, as well as conventional ones. But the idea is that as you walk down the path to the house, you can grab a strawberry or two and pop it in your mouth. But this is our undercover sitting area. It's super comfortable. We just hang out here a lot. When the weather's beautiful, it's good. When the weather's not so good, we've got these roll-up blinds that we have them on each side of this space, so it can actually be an enclosed space. And if we wanted to, say if we were having a party and it started raining or something, we could open those French doors and the warmth from the air conditioner would also head into this area. This is also where I keep the subtropical plants. So these ones are Tamarillo, that's the one on the right. It's a bit hard to see against the backdrop of the shade tree, but that's a tree tomato. And this one, it has died off because of winter. It does that every winter, but it's a babaco, which is also known as a champagne fruit plant. The reason those are here under this tree is to try and give them shelter from frost. They're very frost sensitive. So walking through that front porch area, just out this side door where there's also a blind. This is my sort of practical area, you could say. You can see the mushroom setup that I've talked about in the mushroom section. We've also got, this is where our front door used to be before we put in the French doors, and that stores all of our equipment. And this is all our other sort of, I don't know, blood and bone and diatomaceous earth for the dusting the chook shed and all my saved seeds and things like that. And on the other side is my seedling raising area. It's always quite nicely sheltered because of all the plants on the other side, and of course all the baskets. Kids tell me I've got a basket fetish, which is totally true, but honestly there are so many things you can use a basket for. And I've got a lot of seedlings here ready to go out. They're the summer ones, and I've said before that it's right on that sort of changeover period between winter and summer. So I'm going to have to go through and probably pull out some broad beans. I'll just see which ones have produced the most already and sacrifice them to make way for this new stuff, because I really don't have much space left in the garden until I do that. Then just heading out of this part, that's the path that leads to those mushrooms around the side. But again, north-facing wall, I couldn't resist putting some things here. Again, this is just raising, propagating plants, mostly from cuttings that I've taken. But this was something we found on Free Goods. Someone was offering it. I don't know if you can tell from this, but that is, what's it called? Aggie pipe? No, not Aggie pipe. It's the stuff that you put in drains, and it's got edges, end pieces that fit into it. And someone had obviously gone to a lot of trouble to string some of these together with metal joining all the sections. The metal goes straight through each one, and they were giving it away. So I was like, absolutely, let's try it. And I put a whole lot of strawberries in there, and as you can see, they're just going crazy. Plus, this is all, don't know if you've ever seen strawberry runners, but this is what I mean by strawberry runners. So they just keep producing, trying to find more places to embed themselves. I just try and give them away or plant them in other places in the garden. We're going to be inundated by strawberries once they all ripen. And further around here, just act like a, some potting mix, a whole lot of sawdust for the chooks. I buy coconut coir in bulk, so I was talking about that as something that absorbs water, and so each of my above ground beds has about a quarter of the contents of it is coconut coir, just to keep moisture. And then around the corner is those mushrooms. Our whole family is we just love cooking and making our own things, making beer, making wine, preserving, all that stuff. So a while back we realized that this porch wasn't filling our needs as well as it pretty easily could. It used to be just this little eave that sheltered it from the weather, and as you can see, we look out where it's on a hill. This is the back end of the house. It's quite high up off the ground, and it just wasn't somewhere you could sit or even do anything, because it'd be windy and wet. But what we did is we had a builder just extend the deck, not the deck, the covering, and that has been the best thing we did. We also got a second-hand sink set, like a kitchen sink. It already had these cupboards underneath it, and right behind it, behind those windows, that's our kitchen sink windows. So there's plumbing already right there. He just attached this new sink on. We have hot and cold, and this then is our outdoor preserving and DIY food and drink area. This is great for a number of reasons. One is that it's really messy when you do it inside. Like if you've made beer or wine, you're always spilling it. There's always a mess. There's lots of water everywhere. Well, at least there is when we do it. Same with preserving. And like I said, our house isn't that big. So once you start on a big project like that, the kitchen gets full really quick, and then you can't do anything else in it either. So by moving all of that out here, it's just been fantastic. So I'll start at one end. This is our back door. That's our sitting spot. That's just beautiful for looking out over the gorgeous trees. This is just storage area for our egg cartons, microwave. And this is the new sink. It's got hot and cold water. And that's where these are beer bottles waiting to be washed, and wine bottles that a friend gave us that are waiting to be washed. But we've also got all our, like our Fowler's lids and things in here. This is cookie cutters, muslin cloth. It's basically just a way that we've found to get things out of the kitchen that don't need to be there. I'm always saving bottles, so whenever we do a tour of the house and garden, I'm giving away sourdough and kombucha starters and things. So they always, you'd think that there might be too many, but no, they always go. Just random other stuff. Washing machine. Most people's washing machines aren't outside, but we don't really have room for it inside. Don't have a laundry as such, so if it was inside, it would be in the kitchen, and we'd rather use that space for other things. So it's perfect out here. Having said that, our clothesline is just around this corner outside, so it's actually perfect. My dad built that when we first moved in here. It's a European style laundry. It's quite high up, so we do have sacrificial clothing things that fall down, but it's nice and close to the washing machine. And this is where we store all our, so we've got some kegs ready to go, some wine kits ready to go, extra flagons because I've started making fruit wine, the beer enhancer, dehydrator, soy milk maker, just different bits and pieces. Our daughter is really into these little things. She gets them at the op shop and she just really loves them. So she's got a donut maker and a waffle maker and a fairy floss maker. And we encourage her. We reckon it's great to learn how to cook, doesn't matter what. That's all our beer equipment and winemaking equipment. And just whenever we have empty bottles, we store them out here and eventually fill them into crates and take them down the stairs, which I'll show you next. So once you're down the stairs, as I've said, our house, the back of it is on stilts. The house is on quite a slope, so the front is ground level, but the back is on stumps. And that gives us an amazing opportunity to have under the house storage. So this is where all our stuff goes once we've made it. And it's a lovely feeling just having all of that stuff there. We can, anytime we're visiting someone, we can easily grab a bottle of wine to take over. The olives are still curing. Hopefully they're tried a few different methods. Went to a local olive orchard this year and picked a bunch of olives. That was lovely of them. But yeah, homemade wine, different kinds, and beer, cider, ginger beer. So we label them each kit so we know what's there.